Now, he says he was a tent maker. And Murphy O'Connor has an interesting take on this. His family, being wealthy, would not have been tent makers. But Paul knew he had to support himself with a trade that would be portable. A tent maker, all he has to do is have a little kit with needle and thread, basically, and scissors and knives. And he could go anywhere in any town, take up with another tent maker's shop, like Priscilla and Aquila in Corinth, and ply his trade. And then he would have people coming and going from that shop that he could then be proclaiming the good news of Jesus to. So there was method to his madness in choosing tent maker as his profession. That too was part of his missionary spirit. A little excursus to Galatia. Galatia was an interesting community. It wasn't a city, but it was an area that was populated by Irish, Celts, in other words. Now, here's a Celtic migration. 6 centuries before Christ, the Celts pretty much came from this Central European area. They migrated all over here, including eventually up here to Ireland. Now, Celts mainly are in Ireland, Scotland, Wales, Brittany, and this little area right here called Galicia in Spain. They were a large colony here. Celts were also the Gauls. They were all over the place. Okay. Paul was diverted there because of sickness, and they took him in. They welcomed him. They were non-Jews. There were no Jews there. And they were not Greeks. They were essentially barbarians. And Paul had a phenomenal success with them, because he didn't have to worry about fighting the Jewish Christians about circumcision. They all accepted him and accepted his teaching. But after he left there, a Judaizing faction from Antioch followed him to correct his teaching. Paul found out about that in Ephesus and was furious and wrote the letter to the Galatians. And you can tell his passion about his subject when you read Galatians. Now, he was talking about, you have been freed from the law. Why are you going back to it? Well, what Paul meant by the law was not the inner observance of moral law, but the outward signs of covenant belonging. Circumcision, dietary rules, and other prescriptions. And Paul was increasingly adamant that Jesus gives the moral code a new basis. The real issue, was an outward sign versus inner reality. And underlying that were causes of division. Male and female equality. Guess what? Only males were circumcised. So right within the sign of the covenant of the Jewish people, there was male-female inequality in that. And universal versus exclusive. Circumcision was not something, and kosher food was not something that could be imposed on everybody. But it was something that Jesus would transcend that, would rise above that, and enable everybody to partake of the covenant that God first had in mind. So now we go to Ephesus. In Ephesus, there are two major things that are from the time of St. Paul. The theater, up here on the hill, which is quite magnificent, and just under that, the agora. Oh, there are a bunch of other things too. But most of the theater is where they had the famous riot of the silversmiths. The origins of Ephesus are lost in prehistory, prominent center of culture and influence in Greek times. In Roman times, it was the capital of the whole western part of Turkey, present-day Turkey, and a major port. And since ancient times, it was a very religious and uniquely religious center of the cult of the mother goddess, Cybele, who became known as Artemis in Greek and Diana in Latin. And that, of course, was the reason for the riot of the silversmiths. And that seems to be the main thing that happened in Ephesus according to Acts. But it's pretty clear that a lot more happened there. Paul wanted Ephesus to be a base from which the surrounding cities would be evangelized. And he did not himself go to evangelize the surrounding cities. It's not impossible that the 7 churches of the Revelation, the book of Revelation, the first 2 chapters of Revelation, the letters to the 7 churches, it's not impossible that those were originally Pauline establishments from the Ephesus base, even though he did not evangelize them, but he sent missionaries to them. He never quite managed to do the same thing successfully anywhere else to establish a base like in Ephesus. But here we see the relationship of Ephesus here with these 7 churches of, you notice, they're all within a couple of days' journey on foot. They're easily locatable, and politically, they were all within the sphere of influence of Ephesus.